Okay, so how do we do this one? Well, same kind of thing. So let's bring it up here. Okay, it's a little bit too far, I think. Right here. 6m cubed minus 6m squared. You'll have different numbers. It randoms the numbers for each of us. So again, so solving x squared or x cubed with an equal. So this is a higher power one. But it's basically the same deal. How do you solve an x squared or an x cubed with an equal? Step number one, get a zero. Well, again, we've already got that. So we don't have to worry about that on this one. Already got a zero. It's already there. Step two, take out numbers and letters in common. Put the GCF in the front, one big parenthesis. I'm kind of using up too much room there. GCF in the front. Put out what's in common. Equals zero. And in this case, we're going to have three things inside. So let's look up here. What's in common? Like what goes into all? They all have an M, don't they? They all have an M. So and so let me help with this. Take out, I said numbers and letters in common. So you're going to take out the lowest power on the letter. Well, let me write that a little bit better. For letters, if all terms, let me see, sorry, I can change how to say it. If all the terms have the same letter, take the lowest power. Because that's what they have in common. Is that phrase making sense? In other words, this has an M, this has M squared, 2 M's, this has 3 M's. So if I had a friend, one of them has an M, I don't even know what it means to have an M. One of them has 2, one of them has 3. How many do they have in common? Just one, right? They all have 1 M. They don't all have 2 M's, and they don't all have 3 M's. So what they have in common is they all have 1 M. That's why you take the lowest power, because that's what's in common. Is that making sense? So I'm going to put an M in the front. Now, what about the fact that they also have a number? Let me point that out. So for the numbers, find the greatest number. Find the greatest number that divides into all the terms. What am I talking about? I think you can divide all these by 6. I know you can divide 6 by 6, obviously. Let's try 432. I'm going to use my calculator. I'm going to try 432 divided by 6. Yeah, it goes in evenly, 72 times. It went in perfectly 72 times. So that means 6 goes into all of those. So I find the greatest number that divides into all of, that's why it's called the GCF. It stands for greatest common factor. Greatest common factor. So I'm finding the greatest number that divides into all three of those. Greatest common factors, the biggest number, right? And why do I say biggest? Well, because they're all divisible by 2, right? 2 goes into all of them. 3 goes into all of them. But the greatest number that goes into all of them is 6. 6 goes into all of them. Okay, so when all is said and done, I'm going to put 6M in the front. 6M is what we call the GCF. It's the greatest amount in common to all three terms. It's the biggest number that divides all three, and it's the most M that they all have in common, which is just 1 M, right? They all have at least 1 M. If this was M squared here, then I would have put M squared in the front, because then they would have all had at least M squared or more, right? That's what I said here, lowest power. So in that case, M squared would have been the lowest power. but it's not. The lowest power is just regular m. We good there? All right, so what goes on the inside now? Whatever works. What do I mean works? Whatever multiplies. Because what we're doing right now is called factoring, and it's the reverse of multiplying. You just ask what would multiply correctly. In other words, 6m times what would go back to 6m to the third? What would work? Well, m squared. Remember, powers add. There's an invisible understood 1 power on that first m. Powers add. And we've already got the 6. 6m times m squared, multiply to go back. What about the next one? 6m times what goes back to minus 6m squared? Minus m to the first, or just m. You don't need the 1. Right? Because 6m to the first times m is 6m squared, because the invisible 1 powers add. And finally, 6m times what? Well, how do you know? We'll just divide by 6. It'll tell you. So again, that comes out to be 72. So I need minus 72, because 6m times 72 will go back to minus 432m. Is that making sense how I factored that first step? I took out what's in common. I found the biggest number that divides into all 3 numbers, and I found the biggest power that they all share in common, which is actually the lowest power. That's the most they have in common, m to the first power. Okay, so questions to that point? We got to do a little bit more. I'll bring it over here, I guess, step 3. Step 3 is going to be factor the m squared minus m minus 72 piece into 2 parentheses. Well, I'll just write it. Just factor it as 2 parentheses with m's in the front. We did some of this back on number 1. And you want to find the 2 numbers that multiply to be minus 72. Get a little more room here. And add or subtract to be what? What number's here? Minus 1. There's an invisible. There's no number in the front. Then it's 1. There's 1 m there, huh? So minus 1. Minus. Let me try to do that a little bit better. Let's get a little scribbly here. M squared minus. Oh, sorry, I'm going to have to rewrite this. There we go. So minus 72 and minus 1. So I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply to be minus 72 and add or subtract to be minus 1. That's how it always works when you do the 2 parenthesis factoring. So what numbers, so go over here on the side, what numbers multiply to be minus 72? Well, 9 times 8 probably comes to your mind. Use your calculator if you're a little rusty, but 9 times 8 is what you need. And what signs do I need to add to be negative 1? It's going to be negative 9 plus 8, isn't it? Is negative 1, and negative 9 times 8 multiplies. Multiplies to be negative 72, adds to be negative 1, doesn't it? Is everybody seeing that? So my numbers are negative 9 and positive 8. How did I figure that out? Well, because whatever sign is in the middle, right here in the middle, that's got to be the sign on the bigger one. Let me write that for you. That'll be a helpful word. Sign in, well, right here. Negative in the middle means the bigger number is negative. The 9 is bigger than the 8, right? So he's got to be the negative 1. That'll always be the case. Is that making sense? Are you hearing me on that? So the sign in the middle will always go on the bigger number when you're doing this 3-term factoring. So we're doing this 3-term factoring. So there we go. So -9 and +8. Those are the two numbers. They multiply to be -72. And they add to be -1. They add to be the -1 in the middle. They multiply to be the -72. All right. So now put everything else back in there that was there from the beginning. So now we have 6m. And now we have m minus 9m plus 8 equals 0. Am I losing you there? So I just took this part here and it broke down to become these two guys. The other 6m is still in the front. And now we're ready to finish the problem. Now step 4, set each part with a letter equal to 0 and solve, right? Because these are a bunch of things multiplying, aren't they? This 6m is multiplied by the m minus 9 is multiplied by the m plus 8, and they're equaling 0. If I said, hey guys, I'm multiplying 3 things and it's coming out 0, what does that mean? That means any of them could be 0, right? So that's what we do. We say, okay, so the 6m alone could be 0, or the m minus 9 could be 0, or the m plus 8 could be 0. If any of those 3 pieces, if this or this or this, if any of them is 0, then when they're all multiplied, the answer will be 0. So they're asking us how to figure out what's making this equal 0. Well, the first one could be 0, or the second one, or the third one. If any of those 3 is 0, then the whole thing will be true. So now and solve. So how do we solve these? Well, this one we're going to divide by 6. Does everybody see why I didn't subtract 6 there? That's because it's 6 times m, right? When that 6 is right next to the m, it's multiplied. So that's 6 times m. So you get rid of that 6 by dividing. So what is 0 divided by 6? It's just 0, isn't it? 0 divided by 6 is just 0. This one you're going to add 9 to both sides. This one you're going to subtract 8. So there's our answers. The answers are 0, 9, and minus 8. And they don't say anything about order on this one, right? Yeah, nothing about order. Just put them in any order you want. Just separate them by commas, like I did right there. 0, 9, minus 8, any order. Doesn't matter. They didn't say anything about order on this one. So just put in the 3 answers in any order and it'll work.